How's it going, YouTube? Coming to you today with another video, and today, guys, what the video is going to be my final thoughts on a tier list before Nationals. Now, the one thing I want to premise is new information is new information, so if you see things even drastically change on this list, it's because of final testing and understanding what is really solid. So this is something that I really do think is pretty accurate as far as going into the event, and what I think will be played, and I think what is relevant. So definitely comment down below what you think, but I really do feel like this is going to be the closest to what we're actually going to deal with. So we're just going to go ahead and start here. We're going to go with Yubel. And this is all going to be very specifically placed as far as where I see it falling in the room. So at the top would be obviously like number 2 here, then number 1. I'm just going to put up to number 1 what needs to be up there, just Snake. Just get the obvious ones out of the way, right? The best deck in the room is going to be Snake by, like, its own league, right? Like, it's just insane. The deck is very good. The second place deck would be Yubel, Yubel Fiendsmith. The deck itself is really solid, but, like, it's not close to Snake. So, it's second, but Snake is still a lot higher than Yubel. The next one here we have is Lab. Lab is definitely an interesting deck. I would say that it's not even that crazy at the moment. I think it really takes a very strong pilot to play Lab. I'd still put it in like tier 2. I do think that Lab is pretty crazy in its own regard with things like Butler for Daruma Cannon and being able to play a lot of the crazy trap cards to just shut your opponent off. So we'll have to see. But again, I think that this is a deck in the right hands that it does very well. As far as like the different Snake variants, I kind of count them all as one. So I'm just gonna go ahead and throw like the Fire King one up here. Doesn't necessarily mean just like Fire King Snake. It's just like Snake variants, in my opinion, are always just gonna be a little higher, right? Except for like the Rescue variant, I think is still like not the greatest. I think setting a lot of back row is nice, but like it's not even my favorite here just because there's so many other cards that you want to play, and then you're forced to play a lot of cards that aren't non-engine, right? So, I know, in my opinion, I think that it's a little lower. But even if you're playing like Fire King Snake or like a pure Snake, I still think it would be up here. I do think that even if you can't afford like the Fiendsmith cards and you have the Snake deck, like the pure Snake deck, it's still going to do fine. I do think that obviously there's a huge edge if you're playing the Fiendsmith cards, but if you're concerned because you don't have the Fiendsmith cards and you just have Snake cards, you're probably okay. Honestly, you're probably fine. So another thing, I'm live right now, so I'm looking at chat as well. Another thing that I can point out is the Cashier cards. I do think is going to be a very solid deck, but it's not going to be like that great, right? So it's going to be like bottom of tier 2. I think that Mulchummy really does give this deck a hard time. But with something like Kashtira Snake Eye, even if you're playing a deck that can fit in a very small Kashtira package, like one Wraithsaw, one Unicorn, and one Fenrir, I think that having Unicorn in your deck is pretty crazy. Because Unicorn ripping the extra deck right now, especially like a Princess, being able to hit the Requiem, hitting a Sequentia, like these are just key pieces that everyone's just playing one of. So I think that no one's really preparing their extra deck for something like a Unicorn. So being able to stick one on board with your end board is pretty crazy in my opinion, because people are siding extra deck cards now because of the fact that the extra deck is so tight that you can't fit it all. So I think ripping one is really crazy. If you look at the Fire extra deck right now, they cut World Sea Dragon and Raging Phoenix. There's not a whole lot left as far as a lot of things that they need to see. So if you rip something like a Promethean, it's tough. It's tough. So I do think that Unicorn is a move right now. I think that card is very, very solid. Tier limit, Rogue. If you have Fiendsmith tier, it probably has a chance, but like it's behind a lot. It's behind a lot. There's a lot of shifter in that room going into Nats, and it's a rough time if you want to play tier limit, honestly. Coming from me, right? Like, it's a rough time if you want to play this deck. I do think that's really cool that you get to play, like, the Spear mode and the Lava Golem and whatnot, just because those cards are cracked right now. But, like, if you want to get hit with Shifter multiple times, you know, like it's the sad truth. It's a rough time. Now, I haven't really talked about this deck a whole lot. I feel like a lot of people have asked me about it, and you know, shoutouts to Eva. Eva keeping this deck mad relevant. Memento. A lot of people have asked me, you know, like where would you put it? Where would you put it? And I kind of saved it for this last one. And honestly, like this might surprise a lot of people, but like low end of top 5 right now, like low end of top 5, like Fiendsmith, Memento, deck's kind of spooky. Deck is kind of spooky. I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of spooky. As far as like the Fire King, this isn't like a real thing to have here, right? Like this is just kind of here. I'm just gonna pair it with Snake because it's just kind of where it's at, right? But like this is the rest of top 5, so there's still 2 more that I would put up here. Because this just counts as 1 in my opinion. But Memento definitely low in the top 5 for sure. So the next one here is going to be Gimmick Puppet. It's just gonna be in Rogue. I do think that a lot of people are going to try board breakers, but I do think that, like I predicted before, hand traps will prevail over board breakers. People are actually maining like 15 to 18 hand traps right now, and I think that if you're dealing with that in a deck like Gimmick Puppet, it's going to be rough. I know that you have Field Spell, and it's neat, but if everyone's maining Droll and Crow, it's going to be rough, right? So it's one of those things where you can play it, you can. So I do think that as far as the gimmick goes, I probably wouldn't, but like it's Rogue. I respect the fact that it's kind of crazy, but it'll get some wins, but I don't think it'll do anything realistically. Madolche, Rogue. I think that the deck's really cool. It has a lot of new cards, and if you really know what you're doing with it, it could top. This is a deck that randomly will just like sneak into top 32, right? It always does at like YCS's. This is Nat, so it's a little different, but I do think that it's some Rogue potential, right? Goaty, don't. Striker, don't. Dark World, definitely don't. Everyone's maining Bishals and Crow and Droll. You're basically siding Crows and maining Bishals, or you're just maining Bishals, or you're maining Crow. So definitely not the format for Dark World. You could get away with it if you just run into a huge like luck streak where you just don't get hit with Droll and whatnot, but like do not. Rogue, it's gonna be Centurion. Then if you pair it with like Whitewood, I would say it's like top of tier 2, being like these 2 together. But if you're just playing Centurion by itself, I'd say like bottom of Rogue. I don't think this deck is very real. There's a lot of things right now, like people are playing Metatronus, and then you can go ahead and like summon a Veiler against a Crimson Dragon, and that's kind of like, oof, you know, like that's tough. So I don't really like this deck at all right now. Maybe it's just like above Madolche, right? Just because it's like an actual deck versus this not being like that real. If it's with Whitewood, then I would say top of tier 2. If it's by itself, somewhere in Rogue. I think Whitewood is really cool. It's definitely a deck that people are going to have to learn and know how to deal with. You're probably going to have to put it in Cosmics if you're going first to help deal with Toy Box. But overall, I think the deck itself has a lot of potential, even without the Fiendsmith cards. So I think that's what's really cool about it. I wouldn't put it in my top 5 by a long shot, but I definitely think that down in tier 2 is where it'll be for now. Pearly, it's somewhere in Rogue. It's probably a don't. Honestly, it's probably a don't. Like top of don't. I know that's kind of funny, but like top of don't. I just think that like people are on Underworld, people are on so many hand traps, and like if you don't open exactly street and you don't get drolled, like the situation has to be perfect for you to be on Pearly. I just think that if you bring it to the event, you're gonna have a rough time. Like it's going to be rough. So definitely keep that in mind as far as what you're gonna do going into the event. Top of tier 2 is probably Chimera, like Fiendsmith Chimera or like Melodious Chimera. These are decks that are definitely sitting at the top tier 2 with the most potential. I think that they're very solid and something that if you want to play them, that you'll probably do pretty well. I do think that if you go first with Chimera, you pretty much win, but Droll is around right now, and we hate that card when we're playing Chimera. That makes, like, pure Melodious better than Chimera, in my opinion, because you have more room for non-engine. So if you're playing these two together, still top tier 2, but I'd probably play Melodious before I played Chimera, just because Melodious still has a lot of resiliency to a lot of different cards. It's still very solid. As far as, like, top of Rogue, I'd probably say Vanquish Soul. It plays through Shifter, which is a lot of Shifter in the room, a lot of room for non-engine. The deck itself has a lot of grind, so I'd say definitely, like, top of Rogue is fine for this deck. As far as Fluanderies goes, probably just under, like, Whitewood. I think everyone's on Molchummy, and that just is a problem for this deck, right? But they did just get spell card Soul Exchange, which is a crazy card, by the way. That card is absurd. So I definitely think that's a huge buff for the deck. But, like, until we get the new Maxi, this deck is going to have a rough time in the Molchummy. Dragonlink, don't. Bottom of don't. Do not. Alright. Alright. Let's talk about it. Alright, let's talk about it. Ritual Beast. So, last time we were here, this was here. You know, sometimes people prove you wrong, and that's okay. Shoutouts to JoJo, topping their Nationals event with Ritual Beast, and another person going ahead and getting top 8 with Ritual Beast. The deck is a pretty crazy Shifter deck. Playing Shifter, playing Di-Fi. It's pretty spooky. I still wouldn't put it in my top 5, but I definitely would have it seated on top of tier 2. I would definitely say top of tier 2 is where it will sit. As far as the most viable deck outside of top 5, it probably is somewhere with Ritual Beast. The deck is pretty complicated. It's something that you really have to study. So it's something where if you are very versed with the deck, I think that you have a very good opportunity going into the event to do well with the deck. Again, you have to acknowledge, you know, sometimes you're wrong. Sometimes you're wrong. It's okay. So I will put it up here. So it's fine. It's fine. As far as Runic Stun, I'm just going to go grab that now. I would say it's like above or below Flu. I don't know. I think that it'll be around, but it's above or below Flu. I'd probably even put it below. I think people will play it, but I don't think people will do well, because I think already a lot of people are anticipating that Runic Sun is going to be in the room at a higher rate, because a lot of people won't have the Fiendsmith cards. And I think if that's the case and everyone's on Cosmics and what have you, it's gonna be rough. It's gonna be rough. I'm not saying that it's, like, not gonna do well, but, like, I think when it's heavily anticipated that it's going to be there, it becomes inherently worse, right? As far as Runic for higher, though, I mean, like, you could just put it above, like, Vanquish. I'd probably put it, like, below. I don't really think that this is the deck to play ever right now, but, like, it's still not a bad deck, right? Like, if you were to bring it and you know how to play the deck very well, it'll still do something. As far as, like, Marinsis goes, it's probably, like, somewhere around where, like, Centurion is. It's not very strong, and you could play it, but, like, it's not really gonna do that much. Same with, like, Sword Soul, same with VV. I think Voice's Voice is just, like, not it. Like, everyone's maining Bishals. Everyone has unlimited amounts of hand traps right now. Like, I just don't think Voices is it. Not even, like, bottom of Rogue. It's probably somewhere up here. It's either above Vanquish or below Vanquish. I would probably say even above Vanquish. But I don't think this deck is very good, though. I've seen it play out a number of times this format so far, and I think that it just doesn't compare to how much Fiendsmith does at the moment. Tenpai is definitely going to be in my top 5 right now. I think this deck is pretty crazy. So definitely it's going to be like Snake, Yubel, Memento, Tenpai, and Branded. I think if you can't afford Fiendsmith cards and you know how to play Branded, you just bring Branded. You just puppet lock people. I know that there's a lot of hand traps to try and stop that, but Branded Lost is a card. So that is something where if you are very confident with Branded, I don't think you'll do bad. I think you'll do just fine. It's a deck that is still pretty crazy to deal with, and it's something that will be around for sure. Just gonna kind of speed through a couple of these here. Plunder Patrol, I probably wouldn't. It's like Rogue, probably like top of don't, but like probably wouldn't. Somewhere in the middle is just pure Unchained. It's usually like Unchained with something. But I do think this deck has a lot of warrant in a format where Droll's really big too, just because you don't really necessarily care about that. As far as Sprite goes, it's probably just like in between here. It's a good solid tier 2 deck. It's probably above Chimera. I think Chimera kind of falls down more because of Droll. These decks kind of move up. But Sprite in general with that end board is pretty crazy, so we'll see. Don't Virtual World, do not play that. Horror Stun, don't play that. Dynamorphia, it's somewhere in the middle, like Rogue. Okay. I think that you'll definitely cheese some wins. It's fine. Rexterm is a pretty crazy card. I know someone will play it. I know someone probably tops with it, but like, I don't know. There's just like so many decks I'd rather play first, right? But I'll put it in Rogue. I think it's okay. But definitely this is where I'm at right now in terms of what I'm preparing for and in terms of what I think is going to be around. So I definitely hope that you enjoyed today's video. Definitely let me know down below in the comment section. Subscribe to the channel and I'll catch you all at Nats. I'm excited to meet as many of you as possible and I'll see you there. Thank you.